All right, we are going to begin in the Big Ten. And one of the conversations we had before we got started is what defines a dark horse? And frankly, guys, I actually like that discussion because it allows us to draw a line in the sand somewhere. But I know you have Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and the question is Michigan. Does Michigan count for a dark horse? Tom, what say you?
No.
I say
it's
no
Michigan.
as well.
I agree. Michigan in the odds board is in a weird spot because they are, like, statistically they are significantly ahead of everybody else, and they are behind, like, also meaningfully, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State. So they were kind of in the no man. Like, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State are clearly, like, not dark horse caliber here according to the odds this year.
Yeah, and then there's like the Grand Canyon, and then there's Michigan.
Right.
And then there's like a decent, sized valley, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
From
that standpoint, I would argue Michigan's a good value play. I don't know if I'd call them a dark horse.
Right. Also, the soft factors here. Michigan, it can't be a dark horse if you're national champion 2 years ago. That's what you're charging.
That's in the Constitution. Yes.
Yeah, that is true. All right, but what about the very next team there? But I'm gonna go ahead and throw it out. I've mentioned it on bold predictions. In on USC. Anybody gonna bite on USC as a dark horse team? I think that's a fair pick. Plus 2,400 to win the Big Ten at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more. It is not super bold as it is the first available after we have drawn the line. But I continue to dig in on this, and I continue to consider what it looks like. A conference schedule draw that sets up pretty well for them, especially compared to the rest of the Big Ten. Anybody else in on USC as a dark horse in the Big Ten?
I don't hate it. Your receivers are, like, fantastic.
I think so.
I think if they get better quarterback play this year, if the defense continues to ascend, I think USC is a pretty decent dark horse pick there. And quarterback being the wild card, you almost have to feel pretty good about Lincoln Riley's track record of getting quality quarterback play. We know Louisville is excited about Miller Moss, and they let Miller Moss walk. So what does that say about Lincoln Riley's belief in the guys who he has? They also didn't, at least to my knowledge, didn't pursue many, if any, quarterbacks in the portal. So that is probably pretty encouraging.
I'm not going to say it's unrealistic. I mean, I think when you're looking for a dark horse, it's a good pick. But my concern is last year, this team sucked on the road. Like, they were very different at home compared to when they left the Coliseum. And they've got a road game at Notre Dame. Of course, that doesn't impact their Big Ten standing. So even if they got pasted there, they would still have the same record in the conference play. But if you look at their road games in the Big Ten, they start with the road game against Purdue. Not really worried about that. But they're on the road for Illinois, Nebraska, and Oregon. And considering the games that they lost on the road last year, I have a difficult time thinking that they're going to go through those 3 games, only losing one of them.
Do you attribute some of that to just being year one in the Big Ten? Like, there's going to be like some adjustment to what you're going to be doing in terms of the travel?
For sure. You could put some of it on there because we saw overall, like, the teams in the league, whether you'd been in the league for a while or not, going from the West Coast to the East Coast, they struggled, like, to a man, every single one of those teams when they were making those trips. Even the games that they won were typically kind of closer battles than the spread would have suggested or you would have expected from their other games. So I still think the familiarity does matter, but I think it's just the travel in general right now. That's probably the bigger factor.
One thing that I have on my notebook is what needs to happen for this to come through is that defense took a step forward from being horrendous, like bottom 30, 35 in the country, to being okay, not an absolute negative. I think you need more steps forward there. If USC is going to be able to win some of those tough road games, it needs to be more improvement, not a continuation of what we saw last year in terms of production. All right, Tom, let's keep it in the Big Ten. Who do you have your eyes on as a potential dark horse?
All right. I think I know who Bud's is, so I'm going to leave that to Bud. And if it's not, I'll jump in with it later. So I'm going to go with Nebraska. I think that obviously losing Tony Gibson from the defensive coordinator, it doesn't help, but I do think that it'll be mostly a seamless transition there as far as what they're doing on defense, because it's still going to be the same overall system. And I just think that they have, in a year in which you look at the Big Ten quarterback situation and there's a lot of question marks, there aren't very many programs outside of that top 3 who could sit there and say, hey, we've got a 5-star quarterback. Nebraska's the one that does. Like, they have the 5-star guy, and he's going into his second year as a starter. And we often see guys go from freshman to sophomore year. They either take the leap or they don't. Like, I always feel like if they don't make a step forward, they're probably just not going to at any point. They probably just are who they are. But if Raiola takes that leap this year, I think it greatly increases what the ceiling of this team can be in 2025. And you look at the way their schedule breaks down, they only have one truly difficult road game, and it's at the end of the year, and it's Penn State. That's not going to be fun for them, but they get Michigan at home. They get Michigan State at home. Northwestern's at home. USC's at home. Iowa's at home. The non-con is not incredibly difficult, so I don't think that they're going to be bruised and battered before conference play starts. I just think that this is the kind of team where I look at that schedule. If they're able to take out Michigan on CBS on September 20th, and they're off to like a 5-0 start, going on the road to face Maryland, that kind of confidence and the way that they'll be feeling, I think, could carry them through the back half of that schedule to where they're very much still in the running for the conference title towards the end of the year.
I don't hate this at all. I mean, you're betting on the upside of a guy that we know has pedigree and real tools at quarterback. Like, if Nebraska has a big time quarterback, then I think they could get there. And if he's playing at that level that they hope he plays at, then they could win it. I think this makes all the sense in the world.
So, yeah, the question in the tailgate, and we're going to keep this kind of fluid. So, when we're talking about a team, we're not going to bounce around too much. The question is, are you talking dark horse to make the playoff, dark horse to win the conference? I think that those are, in some of these conferences, the same conversation. We just might direct you to one price or different, but very different conversations in the Big Ten and in the SEC, because you've got more of a path in terms of being an at-large. Nebraska, to make the college football playoff, plus 650 at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, plus 3,700 to win the Big Ten. Which side would you play for that one?
I think it depends on how much of your analysis is that you like the schedule, right? If your analysis is really you like the schedule more, then I think you probably prefer the playoff.
Yeah.
If your analysis, you think that they're really, really going to be good, then you could actually survive like a game against, we're assuming, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon in some order.
It's right? The Indiana path. That's what I was looking at.
Right.
I was like, I think I would rather have Nebraska to make the playoff, imagining that they go on some fever dream 10-0 start. They get humbled by Penn State. They level out against Iowa. And then all of a sudden you're just right there with the win total that the committee's going to respect no matter what your strength of schedule is. So I think that I would rather have that. Is that check out?
No, I'm kind of there with all these other Big Ten dark horses. Like, I mean, I think the odds reflect the reality of the situation. Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon are probably the 3 best teams in that league, and they all have question marks. But I feel like the odds of all 3 of them cratering to the point where they can't win the Big Ten at the same time are very, very minuscule. So when it comes to these dark horse conversations, I feel like it's the 4th team that I think is more of the dark horse than anything. I think that top 3 is pretty solid in all reality.
I was imagining the Nebraska future, wrote about the Cornhuskers as a long shot CFP pick. And I was thinking, with Dana Holgorsen, a full off season to work with Dylan Raiola, I think that the defense is going to take a step back because of some of the players that they lost and also the coaching loss of Tony White. Like, could Nebraska just be one of those 45-42 type teams?
Yeah, I think their defense will be better than that, though.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know that there are enough teams who are going to put 45 on them, but they could be a little more pointsy than
points. Yeah, I guess 45-42 is the wrong number. But just the idea that last year, I think the only team that they might have only put up 40 plus points once all year. I mean, it was a team that was, winning lower scoring games and not asking Dylan Raiola to go out there and do video game stuff at all. He just needed the right drive and the right plays at the right time. I was wondering if, with the steps back on defense, Dana Holgorsen, not afraid to get out there and really let it rip. I could see Nebraska being a high flying, fun team to watch.
You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. The guy in the chat said can't.
Maybe he's just deaf.
maybe if you're watching on your phone, maybe don't have your phone on silent. That's my tip there. Also hit like.
Yeah, also like the stream. Thank you, Crescent. Okay, Bud, where do you want to turn our attention?
So I think they're like legitimately, if we're
I've
going
got
dark
5
horses,
teams that I thought would be fun to discuss. So I'm curious where you're going next.
Yeah, I had like 6
Sick.
actually.
Let's
So
go.
I mean, if we're thinking dark horse, implied in this dark horse conversation is probably that in this hypothetical, that the top 3 teams are maybe not like Death Star enabled, right? Maybe the loss of the receivers at Oregon with the Evan Stewart news, maybe that hurts a little. Maybe Penn State's offense never takes another step. Maybe Ohio State just doesn't mesh the same way that they did last year. So yeah, but I guess I'm more quiet than the other 2. It says so. I'll try to work on my levels there by talking louder. Okay. So I actually went with Washington.
Knew it.
Okay. and I think it's an interesting play. They're actually, what are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th to win the league. There's some 7,500 out there if you want.
You've got some like 10-1 neighborhood to make the playoff with Washington too.
So here's kind of my thoughts on this, right? Obviously, Damon Williams needs to be a stud. I had him in my top 10 quarterback rankings. I think he is actually really good. I like the combination of him and Jed Fish. They have a stud at receiver. They have a really good back in Jonah Coleman. So, yeah, I think they will be pretty fine offensively. Defensively, I do have some worries, but it's possible they can hold their own. Now, if you look at the schedule, look, they're going to have a lot of travel because they're freaking Washington and they're playing in the Big Ten. So almost every trip is a long trip, and you do have to factor that in. But for the Big Ten purposes, you have to play Ohio State. That sucks. If you have to play Ohio State, I think I'd rather play Ohio State early rather than late, and they do. Now, coming off the Apple Cup, that's no fun, and you have to go around and play a potential trap game at Maryland. But if you're good enough to be in the actual dark horse conversation, you're not sweating Maryland, okay? Like home, road, on the moon, doesn't really matter. Like, you should smoke Maryland if you're a team that's really like in contention to win the Big Ten. Rutgers at home, that's a nice little breather. Then you got to go to Michigan. Here's where I think this is an interesting schedule that could lend itself to Washington, actually winning the Big Ten or getting to the championship. And I know the chat says it's a tough Big Ten schedule. I don't disagree. What if Michigan sucks? Like, what if that offense isn't any good? And what if the defense takes a step back after losing like the best defensive tackle tandem we've seen probably since that Georgia team had Jalen Carter and the other guy there? Illinois at home is a lot better than Illinois having to play on the road. At Wisconsin, I mean, what are the odds Luke Fickell is fired by November 8th? I think 50-50. Like they're going to be one of the top jobs open this year, assuming he gets fired and their win total keeps going down. So I don't think
don't you think Uncle Barry wants you to finish the year? I mean, I feel like Uncle Barry wants to lead you to it and make you really like sniff it so that you can just sit in it.
I don't think he gets fired unless the bottom's out.
Unless the team quits, and I don't know if the team's going to quit.
Purdue, like I think Washington would play Purdue today. Next year, doesn't matter. Like that. That should be a dub at home. At UCLA, we have no idea how that's going to work. Maybe it works great, but maybe it doesn't. And then Oregon at home. I think Oregon is a very high variance team this year. I can see them being really good, but they have not played a lot of these young guys who they signed. So it's not like, oh yeah, they've got 12 dudes who played 200 snaps last year, and then we know they're ready. We don't know they're ready. We know what the recruiting pedigree was. We don't know about Oregon's player development yet. That's not me knocking Oregon's player development, by the way. It's not saying like, hey, I don't think they can develop players. We just don't know yet. This will kind of be the proofs in the pudding year for Dan Lanning. So there is some potential variance that makes this really hard Big Ten schedule maybe not quite as hard if things break a certain way. And that's kind of my point, right? Do I need to take another step to the right? I'm going to move the computer to the left because I'm actually blocked out by this desk.
Yeah,
so like that's kind of that's what I like really high upside quarterback. I think there is a potential for this schedule to be slightly easier than maybe it appears on paper. And they could absolutely lose 5 games, 100%, as the chat points out. Yeah, we're picking dark horses here. I think that's a fun one.
You mentioned it, and I do think there's an alternate universe where Washington is still in the Pac-12, Larry Scott is still Pac-12 commissioner, and Washington is playing games on the moon.
We did make those jokes about Larry Scott being so on the forward, the futuristic models here. He was going to put the Pac-12 title game on the moon, sell the rights to it, sell the rights to the moon, instant profit. Could have kept the league together, Larry. I really like, what if Ohio State doesn't have it together, right? So because Ohio State's going to start with Texas, everything's going to be built into that. They get 2 more games and then a super early off week in advance of the trip to Washington. Yeah, what if all the turnover gives them that? And this is where I would like Washington better as a CFP team, as an at-large, because that win would be a silver bullet. Because I do not expect Ohio State to lose 2 regular season games. Like, if that's where Ohio State trips up and then they get everything together, go on a run, you'd be sitting there, even if you lose to Oregon, you're going to be maybe even one more game, you'd be 10-2, and you'd be sitting there at the committee table and you'd have that Ohio State win. And that would be a huge, huge piece of it. So yeah, at some of the 10-1 playoff odds, I kind of like those as dark horse options. I got a couple more that we could discuss. Who would be the next up on Big Ten? Who would be the next team that you'd be pressing in terms of getting a top dark horse status here in the Big Ten?
I'm going to say my number. Well, I'm going to say my number 2. I think Tom will probably go with it, but I'm going to take Iowa. What if Gronowski is really that good?
Yeah.
The FCS transfer quarterback they got. I think if he's really good, I do think Iowa will still be a quality team defensively. That's a possibility there.
Am I supposed to say Illinois?
I was thinking so, but
I'm not saying it. Keep it.
They're not a dark horse. That's a top 25 team.
No, just keeping them humble.
Okay.
They're feeling themselves lately. They're out and about, talking a lot, and I enjoy it. But I'm just trying to, I don't want to be gassing them up too much. But yes, they are.
Is it possible that there is a humbling season for Iowa this year?
Yeah.
Did you see 6-6?
I mean,
6-6 doesn't sound right for Iowa football. 8-4 sounds right for Iowa football as I imagine it, but
it's like I have to find 6 losses. Like, okay, Penn State they could lose, Oregon they could lose, Iowa State they could lose, USC they could lose on the road, Nebraska they can lose. Yeah, 6-6 is not completely out of the picture. I mean, they did go 7-5 or 8-4 in the regular season last year.
Yeah, I think that's where I am, where it might be a little bit sneaky difficult in terms of Iowa just being in. Rutgers is probably more of a coin flip than you realize, and that game is on a Friday night in Piscataway. Indiana, I'm not expecting that to be a huge step back, maybe a little step back, but that looks like a coin flip type game. Minnesota could be a coin flip type game. We'll see where Michigan State's at, but Iowa and the potential end of the Kirk Ferentz era, I'm very curious to see if results at all end up having play a role in that storyline.
That back half of the schedule, context-wise, it's not easy. Starting with the Penn State game, and then you've got Oregon, you're at USC, you're at Nebraska. I mean, you're going to have to score points to win some of those games, and that's going to be the thing. Can they score points? Because defensively, there's an expectation that they're not going to be terrible defensively. They'll be able to stay in most games, but can they score enough to win them?
Did they boat race Michigan State last year?
I believe so.
A few teams did.
I know.
Yeah, it's hard to remember everybody who boat raced Michigan State.
It got really bad for Sparty down the stretch. That was actually one from the tailgate. Tailgate offered up a, if Aiden Childs hits type proposal. Here's my pushback on Michigan. Yeah, I don't think Michigan State is there from a personnel perspective yet elsewhere.
Agreed.
If Aiden Childs hits, might be
Iowa lost to Michigan State.
Okay. There was a meteor. There was a comet. There was a weird game as I was combing over results recently. Michigan State had everything clicked. They won like 40-22 or something like that.
It was 32-20. And amazingly, Cade McNamara never started another game for the Hawkeyes afterwards.
This is Michigan State also has one of the tougher conference draws in the Big Ten. They are going to be cycling in your Penn State, that you are going to be having your Michigan. I guess they do avoid Ohio State and Oregon, but I don't see 7 wins. So I don't see 6 or 7 conference wins. I see something that's much closer to 500 or below 500, even if Aiden Childs hits. There's just too much work to be done elsewhere.
I think 2-7 is far more likely than 7-2.
Great. Well put.